Good afternoon, good evening, good night, and good morning to all who enjoy stamps. I certainly do, and it's time for some stamp collecting fun. While I can just about breathe, weather's a little bit better today. A bit of sunshine, so there may be a bit of glare going on. But what I thought I'd do today is have a look at a bit of a dive, my own dive, into the top 10 of GB history stamps that I own. So, there are many more pieces of history and famous people. I'm looking at people, really. Very nice people within history who have contributed to, not just GB, but to worldwide almost. So there may be one or two trigger warnings out there. So we'll have a little look. And this is just something that I've gone into my box and pulled out 10 stamps. So, there are people missing that I would, if I had stamps of them, I would be putting in. Anyway, what have we got here? We've got two gents there holding up a banner and that sort of thing. So we'll remove this. And the other thing is, I've done no research on these people, so I'm only going to talk about what little I know about them. And the first one that we see is somebody called Rowland Hill. He lived, according to this stamp, from 1795 to 1879, so he lived a good old age. And he is the father of the postage stamp. He introduced the mail, the post as we know it today, really. So he has to go as number one historical figure in this sort of countdown of stamps and history. Just my opinion, that is all. What else do I know about him? Absolutely nothing. I believe he was an MP and he may have introduced the change in Parliament. So whether he was actually in charge of the post office, I don't know. Maybe you know. Maybe you know. I certainly don't. So we'll leave him over there. The next person we have to thank, maybe, within history, for not just stamps, but all printing, is William Caxton. I think he made an appearance in a previous video of mine, and I mixed him up with Chaucer. But William Caxton invented the printing press. 1476 was the year, and without him there'd be no books, there'd be no magazines, there would be no stamps, there'd be no envelopes, there'd be no writing, because we wouldn't need it. It would all be done through language only, and it would all be lost. This stamp I do like, because I love the cancel, don't you? First day of issue, lovely and clean, 29th of Sept 1976, Swindon in Wilts. Too good to go in my catalogue of cancels. It's too pure, so this goes, I've recovered it from a stock book where I keep my bestest. So there we are. Number 3, another person we have to thank. Now this is Hamlet. We have to thank the creator, the writer, the playwright of Hamlet, which is William Shakespeare, who created, to all intents and purposes, the English language. Most of our sayings today, idioms, not most, a lot of our sayings and our idioms come from Shakespearean plays. His plays and his works did cement English as a language that people could use, understand, not just in England but across the globe. That's why English is a global language now. If you don't believe me, ask the airports which language that they use. There's only one language, and that is English, that is used in airports for safety measures. Righty-ho. So that's William Shakespeare, thank you to him. I picked this up it is Henry V, um, a famous king. Agincourt, everyone's heard of it. He may have been bolstered somewhat his reputation by Shakespeare, but certainly defeating the French at Agincourt cemented England as a superpower in that in Europe, and a great king. And though you wouldn't say a great king, he was a king. But the king's duty then was something different, which was to invade France and to defeat the French, which he did. So there we have him. We next go to this character. This is Francis Drake, and he defeated the Spanish. The Spanish Armada was coming to release England from the chains of Protestantism. Queen Elizabeth, good Queen Bess, was on the throne, and Drake was sent out with his not Drake, but the fleet was sent out to defeat the Spanish Armada, which they did. Through the tactics of Drake. Drake is remembered most of all. Also, I believe he discovered all sorts of things like Drake's Passage, one of the most dangerous and daring areas of the ocean. Underneath the tip of South America, there's a passage there which waves are the size of apartment blocks, skyscrapers. When he discovered that, rode it, went round. Yeah, he was a menace to the Spanish, and again he maintained Britain as a top power when it was all but on its knees at the time. Okie dokie, next. These two actually come together, and I'm going to put these, and I'm not saying these are the greatest ever, but they do talk of history, and something a little bit personal to me also. So here we have Henry Morton Stanley, who went out to discover the lost Dr. Livingstone, who was a religious icon, who was over in Africa to, assist with the Africans in Africa. And he went missing for a number of months or years. And Henry Morton Stanley not volunteered, but he was paid by a newspaper, New York Times, was it, something like that, to discover the whereabouts of Dr. Livingstone. And the famous Dr. Livingstone, I presume, comes from the meeting of these two men. Why is it personal to me? Well, he was born in the town that I'm talking from now, Denbigh in North Wales. So, yeah, that was a nice bit of history. And at the time, it was the talk of the known world. So everybody was interested in what happened to Preacher, and eventually Livingstone didn't bring him back. Livingstone refused to come back, but he was discovered by Livingstone, and the world moved on. Okie dokie. So those come as a pair, really. So that's 1, 2, buckle my shoe, 3, 4, knock on the door, 5, 6, pick up stick, 7. So we want number 8 now. Here we have Florence Nightingale, who, again, every schoolboy, everyone who goes to school has heard of all these people. Florence Nightingale served as a nurse in the Crimea War, which was actually, well, it's still going on now, isn't it? But the British were there fighting against the Russians and Turks, I think. And she went over there to help the soldiers who, before that war, had no nursing care after battle previously. So she broke the mould, went over with nurses, introduced hygiene into the way soldiers were treated. It wasn't just a case of we'll cut off their leg and hopefully they'll survive. There was actual treatment coming from her, and she being at the forefront of that change in the treatment of soldiers, is now world renowned, world famous for that. So well done to her, Florence Nightingale. Not everybody's cup of tea, apparently. It's always interesting to read the backstories around strong characters. And if you think they're saints, they ain't. But we don't want saints. We want people at a place, at a time, in that moment in time, to do their stuff. And she did her stuff then. Okay, next stamp, which is interesting for me, possibly not for anyone else. This is James Clark Ross, who discovered Antarctica. 1800 to 1862. So really, he set off the age of exploration down on the around about the South Pole. So we had all those exciting race, the race to the pole, and Shackleton and Captain Scott and Amundsen, and that's always been, a fantastic adventurous type period for me, because I did love reading about them. Read all the, not all the books, but I've read got a collection of Antarctica books and exploration books. So he was the man who discovered Antarctica, James Clark Ross. Yeah. And finally, I have a few different stamps of Sir Winston. Sir Winston Churchill, Britain's greatest Prime Minister, you would say. He saved us single-handedly in the Second World War. I exaggerate, of course I do. But he stood up when others were about to capitulate. And what a leader, what an icon. And so he deserves not just his own stamp, but there are many stamps around Sir Winston. So I've left him to last because I think of all Englishmen, he is probably the greatest of all. So those are my 10. There are others I would have liked to have found stamps for example, Nelson. That was one, wasn't it? Nelson, Wellington, that sort of era when Napoleon was on the rampage all over Europe. But also others, and I've kept it really to what I've managed to find in the last half hour. Call me unprepared, if you will. But as you can see, there's a lot of history around stamps, and that's one of the beauty about stamps. Strangely enough, they are time machines. Look at this. This stamp, 15th of May, 1973. That stamp was alive and moving and in a place, Catford or Watford. This has travelled through time to now. So I can place myself now back in that time. And as for, history, genealogy, people can find a stamp that's associated with their life, with their journeys, with their travels, the places they've been, where their families are from, hither and thither. So there's a lot that can be said and done and enjoyed and have fun with stamps. Enjoy your day, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.